Hello, everyone. Welcome to our session here. I just want to ask, how's everybody doing? How's the Ignite been so far? We're in day 3. Seems like day 9. Are your wristband counters tagging it up? One of my colleagues, she did 10 miles on Monday. So I was like, well, and then of course her Fitbit told her on Tuesday that she wasn't doing enough to equal what she did on Monday. Technology, gotta love it. Hey, just a quick reminder, I don't know if you've heard on the evals, but if you fill out your evals, which we really like the information we get from the evals, but also Microsoft Ignite is donating $5 to the Red Cross for every eval that's filled out. So don't only just fill out the eval for this session, fill out for the other sessions. If you think all the sessions you've been at, that's a lot of impact you can help us make. So please do that. So great, we'll get started with our session here today. You have 3 team members from the FastTrack team. Right here you have Sharon Liu, she's a product manager. And then you have Tom Wisnowski, who's a program manager. And you have me, I'm Thomas Wicker, and I'm the program manager also as part of FastTrack. Welcome to Move Your Data to Office 365. This is a topic that we do every year, and it keeps evolving, and more details come out, and we have great questions coming from our audiences, and it helps us hone our business, what we need to deliver better for our customers in Office 365. Tom will take us through right now with the objectives and...
Yeah, great, absolutely. So really, what we want you to walk away with this afternoon is really just an understanding of the free FastTrack benefit that's available to you, and in particular, the migration part of the benefit. So we're going to spend a little bit of time today focusing on that, looking at the migration process and what we offer and how it works. And then most importantly, what you need to know to be prepared to work with FastTrack and be successful in a FastTrack migration. So, Microsoft 365, how many people have heard about it by now? Yes, we know? All right, well actually, let's test that theory. So, who likes free pie? Anybody want free pie? Okay, free pie, everybody likes free pie. Okay, first person can tell me one or more of the products or product suites that are included now with Microsoft 365. Give me a hand. Office 365, we got a winner. All right, how about the other ones? What do we add? Sharon, which one was first?
Oh, I don't know. I think everyone has to win.
All right. Guy in the blue. All right, yes.
We don't have that many pies.
Yeah, exactly. But absolutely, Microsoft 365, Windows plus Office 365 plus EMS, it's a great thing. So take advantage of all those capabilities. So, with Microsoft 365, we have FastTrack for Microsoft 365. And what are we here to do? Basically, we're here to help you maximize the return on your investment in Microsoft 365 as quickly as possible. Now, the way we do that is we're going to be connecting you with remote engineers that have been trained to help you with onboarding onto the service, so the technical enablement, how do you get things going, identity-wise, network, etc. We're going to have those same engineers help you with adoption and communication. So now that you've turned it on, how do you get users to use it, right? How do you change their behavior, right? What are some of those new capabilities you should be advertising within your organizations? And then finally, our favorite subject here up on the stage, and our focus of today's session, is migration. So how do we help you get your data to the cloud? Now, the best part about this benefit is it is completely free to you as a customer of Microsoft 365. So in that purchase, you're going to get all those capabilities and all that assistance free of charge.
All right. So thanks, Tom, for that. I actually work and focus with IT professionals on a day-to-day basis, and so that's like similar to you in the audience today. It's an honor to be here. And sometimes the conversations pivot around, I am on Google and Lotus Notes, and what's the method to move? Help me out with that. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and ask Thomas to get us started.
Yeah, absolutely, Sharon. So often the question is, what comes as part of the migration? What migrations are available? And our mail migration benefit includes Exchange, Lotus Notes, or IBM Domino. Yes, they are the same thing, and they still are around. And Google. And we also, and for all 3 of those types of migrations, we offer email migration of calendar, contacts, and email. We also have IMAP, which is for our for really more tertiary platforms, which is just mail. But I mentioned Google, and we also offer in our Google part migration, we also offer G Drive in our file share migrations, G Drive and Box, which is to OneDrive, and then our file share migration benefit is file shares to OneDrive and team sites.
All right, and so I like that he mentioned TechNet, because TechNet is real one source of truth for where you could pull down the information on the latest and greatest of what FastTrack provides, right? And so, excuse me.
Yeah, Sharon, you're mentioning the TechNet. That didn't hit on it strong enough, which is, I'll go back to that, is that TechNet is where we're constantly putting the updates that we have. We are always evolving the offer or the benefit, and so it's really encourage you to use TechNet. And TechNet also has the FastTrack process and procedures on a high-level flow of how we provide the benefit, and really encourage you when you are looking to do a transition, or maybe you're looking to do another transition, you can use FastTrack over and over again. We have customers coming back. They did their mail migrations, and they found some box users in their environment that went rogue and did box. And they come back to us, and we help them move their box data. But really use the TechNet to really understand what's the latest updates before you go into a plan. Just don't go, oh, I remember it was this. It also has kind of the policies, the general policies, how we execute the migrations. But we'll dive in that more in today, but always use TechNet as a good reference point for yourself.
We talked about that earlier, so I thought I heard that.
Yep.
And I was looking at the next slide, so I'm going to go ahead and get that started. Can you tell us about how FastTrack engagement looks like and how it works?
Yeah, Sharon, the FastTrack engagement is really something that we work with customers from all parts of Microsoft. And when you do your initial purchase, or you're thinking about it, you're usually working with your account teams, or you have some sort of big contact, somebody contacting you from Microsoft when you make that purchase. And we really, really encourage you they should be working, your TSP should be engaging, working with you to build your migration, your deployment plan, not just your migration plan. And in this phase, we're trying to understand what your objectives are, why you're needing to do this, not just like, hey, I just want to shut down my Exchange server, that's a good one, or look, and get off Lotus Notes finally, but what are your objectives? Is there a pending situation happening at your company that you're trying to align this transition with? And this will always lead into the next phase, which is our initiate phase, because once we have that plan from you, we're able to then, you want to pop up the initiate there? We're able to then help you, when we engage with you from a FastTrack team, understand what you're hoping to achieve with this, so we tailor the conversation to what you're needing to do. So like example in the mailbox, well, we don't start talking to you about Lotus Notes migration if you're on Google, because really it's a cool topic, but it's not really going to help you. So that's what we use that initiate phase for, is really understand really make sure we're translating what you're telling us that you want to achieve. We bring that to fruition then into the assess phase. And in the assess phase, we're really going to help you start looking through your environment and understanding what it means to actually make that transition and to bring it to your end goal. And in that phase of the assess, we will also have what we call our migration workshops, which is more what we're talking about here today, and Tom will go into that a little bit further on here. But in that assess phase, we're really trying to help you understand what we expect from you and what we'll provide for you. We provide you tools to assess your environment for mailboxes and so forth. I just sped up my slides really fast. I'm talking super fast. No, I'm just kidding.
Sneak peek into the future, folks.
Yeah. Okay, so, but in that assess phase, we're really trying to get you your groundwork laid so you can go into your remediate phase successfully and start making your changes in your environment or setups that you need to do. This is also a time where often our partners have a really good can help you come alongside you and help you with your remediation, because there are sometimes things that in your environment, maybe some legacy parts, or if you're on Lotus Notes, there's some Notes Active Directory remediation that needs to be done. That is maybe pushing, or you don't have time to do it, or it's pushing you past your known skill set and you want to get it right. We have great partners that can help, Microsoft partners that can help with that phase. Out of the remediate phase, we get into what we call our enable phase. And this is when you start seeing the fruition of all your work and getting ready to get your ROI on your investment in Office 365 or Microsoft 365 starts coming to light. And in this enable phase, you're starting to turn on the services and starting to see parts coming alive. This is when you start, so your end users start seeing things starting to pop up in their day-to-day action. But also part of that phase, coming off of that phase, is the migrate. That's when we really start migrating your data. And we'll dive more into that flow further on here in the presentation. As we do the migrations, this is another angle or approach that you are enabling your users to use the service. And the last part of that is the adoption phase. And the adoption phase is really actually something you started actually in the very beginning. See what we did there? You think it's at the end, but it's actually in the beginning. Because you actually, when you were planning, when you wrote your deployment plan, you were laying your ground for what you want as your adoption strategy. And really, in the end, this is when you see your adoption coming to play. But as you iterate through these things, you constantly should be looking at your adoption. What are you hoping to achieve? That was that question we want to ask in the deployment plan is really, what are you trying to achieve with this? If it's just a lift and shift, just doing what you did Exchange on-premise, do the same as Exchange in the cloud, boy, you're selling yourself a little bit short. I mean, the real goal of this is to get more out of your IT and get your end users to stop looking at IT or mail as a cogs, but rather as something that enables them to be more successful in their business. But there's also part of it that we do have expectations on you in the migration phase, that there's things that you need to do and that we will do. And so Tom's going to take you through that part.
Great. Yep, so as I mentioned earlier, this is a benefit that's delivered remotely to your organization. So really you have to look at the Microsoft FastTrack engagement really as a partnership. And there's going to be certain things that your FastTrack team is going to be responsible for, and then certain things that your organization is going to be responsible for. So let's talk about those. First, we always start off the engagement with really deep diving into how your particular migration is going to work. So we offer lots of different types of migration. Some of the processes are slightly different depending on what you're trying to migrate, and so we'll explain that in detail. And most importantly, really explain the outcome of what is going to be migrated and what to expect, so that then you can go back to your end users and really drive that adoption and communications. In that workshop, one of the key things we'll talk about are requirements. So depending on the type of migration you're performing, you're going to provide to us one or more things. Typically, it's going to be accounts that have access to the source and destination environments, but also it could include on-premises infrastructure. So depending on the type of migration, there could be some additional things that we need. And we'll talk through that in great detail and provide the specifications and answer whatever questions we can along that way to make sure that you're successful. From there, as Thomas mentioned, as part of our process, we run a series of assessments. And again, it is slightly different based on what you're trying to migrate. But we have pre-flight check tools, and we have inventory tools and things that help you understand your environment, whether that be your mail environment or maybe your file shares. And we try to identify things that we think may impact your migration experience. And if we find those things, what we're going to provide is some guidance on how you can possibly remediate. Maybe there's things that you want to do before we start the migration, or possibly maybe things you should expect to do after migration. Next, once we've worked through those remediation details, it's really about scheduling. Right? And so we're there to help you understand how you can effectively group your organization into what we call batches or waves, and make sure that you understand how to schedule your users for migration. Then, of course, we get into the migrations, and the first thing that we do is a series of test and pilot migrations. This helps us make sure that things are working as we would expect, but also it gives you an early peek into what to expect as part of the migration process. And so as we work through those pilots, that's where you can introduce some of your users in the organization to what the experience is and what the outcome is, and then we can work together in fine-tuning that to make sure it's meeting your needs before we move forward into a full velocity migration. And then finally, along the way, we're always going to be providing migration results. So you'll get timely reports that explain what did migrate, maybe what didn't migrate, and then some additional guidance if we do encounter some of those issues. Now on your end, you're going to have another set of responsibilities. So first, you're going to be providing project resources. So again, remember, this is a remotely delivered benefit. So you're going to want to have a project team that's ready to work with FastTrack to make sure we can move as quickly as possible. So typical things you want to have is maybe some project management or program management. We've talked about end user communications and adoption and change management. That's important. But also, you're going to have to connect us with your IT counterparts, right? So we have maybe network questions to resolve through VPNs. We have infrastructure we may need, accounts. So we'll be working with multiple teams in your organization. So you'll definitely want to think about putting together a program to work with FastTrack to be successful. Next, you're going to be working on those prerequisites. So again, typically it's accounts and access, but it can also be infrastructure and things like VPN access that sometimes for some organizations can take time. So it's important to look at those prereqs early on in the process and then start to work on those as soon as possible so that we can maintain a schedule through your migration. Next, you're going to go ahead and complete the remediation activities. This is going to vary based on the type of migration you're performing. This could be as simple as perhaps maybe making sure all of your users are licensed and enabled. It could be perhaps maybe different types of content that we wouldn't recommend be migrated into, let's say, OneDrive, and so then selecting a different home for that content. We'll help you through that process, but there's going to be some things that you're going to decide that maybe you want to do upfront before we start migrations, and then some things that can also be done after migration, and we'll help you make that decision. You're going to complete what we call migration questionnaire and schedule. So really, this is just how we capture all the information about your environment. So you give us those accounts and the machines and other information we need, and then also that schedule. So again, scheduling is really important, and it's based on your business needs. You'll be telling us which users to migrate when, and then we conduct those migrations on your behalf. Afterwards, we're going to do post-migration remediation. So remember, we'll provide those detailed reports after each migration wave. Sometimes in migrations, issues can occur, right? It's not uncommon. So we'll help you understand perhaps things that maybe occurred, maybe an item that didn't migrate, and then provide some guidance on how you can handle that post-migration with your support staff and your end users. And then finally, and actually really throughout the entire process, it's really about planning and implementing that change management portion of the program, right? Making sure your users fully understand the transition they're going to go through, helping them really understand the new capabilities they're getting by going to the cloud, getting them excited about it, and making sure that they're prepared to understand when they're going to migrate and what their responsibilities are as part of that process, right? So looking at that change management program. So now, why don't we actually take a look at the FastTrack migration process in a little bit more detail?
Right, so, we're going to dive into that little part about how we give the reports back. We're always evolving our process of how we communicate and how we do these things. We've now migrated over 7.5 million seats over the last 3 years, 4.5 this last year, over 6.7 petabytes of data. It's been quite a bit of volume, but part of this thing that we always are working on and getting the customers your right information at the right time is FastTrack in general and all up has a really kind of a standard process of how we communicate with you, giving you the details of what needs to happen, here's the next steps, here's where you need to go. But when we get into data migrations, fully understanding this is a lot more of an intense time. This is a critical time where communications is paramount because we're actually moving your data. We're helping you move your data, and that's sometimes your IP. That's your business. That's what you do. That's how you are successful as a company. And so when we do these migrations, we have some communications that go out ahead of time when, hey, these batches are syncing. This is great. At the time of the kickoff migration, we give you an alert on, yes, we've kicked these off. These all successfully kicked off. This is what's being moved. This is the counts. Anything that maybe didn't pass the pre-flight, maybe you thought you had fixed it, but it didn't actually get fixed or hadn't replicated the fix. We'll give you a notification about that. But then we'll also give you, at the end of the migration window, Tom talked a little about the windows and the groups. We'll give you a heads up of here's what's completed within this time. If something is not, we'll identify what is not completed. And then we'll also then, at the end of when that we'll give you updates along the way to when you're finally completed with those batches. This usually part of our pilot working with you is to try to hone down that we don't have migrations bleeding past the window. So we find that sweet spot of how much you can move within a window. These windows are 3 windows throughout the day. There's a whole process. It's on our TechNet site. It gives you kind of the detail of the windows that we use. They're really kind of focused around, even though like our exchange migrations are relatively non-impactful to the end users, we try to focus those migrations kind of in the time windows of the different parts of the world. So we're doing it at the nighttime for those end users. But when you get those reports, there are some times where you will get something that says, hey, this user didn't pass, or this object didn't move. And we have a standard set of errors that we give out with those. And in the assessment workshops, we give you the directive of here's kind of the top 10 things that means, and here's what needs to be done. If we run into something unique, our migration velocity managers are there to help you to maybe negotiate through what that means or what needs to be done. But once you have fixed those problems, you can reinsert those users into the next migration batch. When that can happen varies on the type of migrations, and that typically has to do with replication. It's not that we don't want to remigrate those users right away. We would love to. But if you've made a change in the environment, we need to re-replicate that data set to make sure for that object that it migrates correctly. So it varies. TechNet talks about that too. But the best case, if you get a report that has no errors, or majority of the users have no errors, you really get to that successful point of now your users are now using what we've migrated in the cloud, and their either collaboration or communications are taken to the next level in Microsoft 365.
All right, so let's work with the customer scenario. I have a customer named Contoso. They have 8,000 seats, and they've been a long-term exchange customer. Now they're planning right now to move to Exchange Online. They've got a lot of questions on their mind. They're thinking, can I move all this out once? And one of the most frequently asked question is, how long will this take? Now, some of the folks think that mailboxes, depending on the size, really differs in terms of movement. It's not really always the case. So with that in mind, how can we be better prepared as Contoso?
Yeah, so Tom kind of took us through a little bit like the workshop flows and the parts of things we expect you to do and for us to do to be able to help you. But we have a couple items to consider, and I'm going to focus on the 2010 and higher scenario. Because most customers now we're running into across the world are, if they're on Exchange on-premise, they're at least on Exchange 2010. We do offer migrations below to 2000 from 2007, but it's a little bit of a different scenario. But really what we want to focus on here is that Exchange 2010, you do have the option for hybrid, and I think it's a great solution to have, but you also have to consider that it does take some time to set up, and how fast are you trying to move. The hybrid scenario gives you calendar coexistence, so FreeBusy passes between the end users that are still on-premise and those that are in the cloud, and it helps with part of also how we replicate that data. Another thing to think is we have also done quite a bit of work. Microsoft launched RBAC roles for the migrations, and what that means is that we can actually reduce our access to your data while we're migrating your data. And what that means is we can actually all we're seeing is a blob, and we're moving that blob from A to B. And that really we're basing that just on item counts. I can't actually open up the data. Security is paramount. We can't constantly keep hearing about these awkward situations that happen for companies. They really are awkward situations. There's no good way to say it because nobody intentionally does these things. But we're trying to also help you feel secure in what's happening there. In Exchange, also, we have the option in 2010. We have the option of the personal archives. Personal archives would not look at the same as just your traditional archives. It's part of your mailbox, and so we're able to move that with. And I only highlight that is we can do this in Exchange. We cannot do this we don't do archive migrations from other third-party platforms. And we have a great list of partners, again, that can help out with those type of archive migrations. But when we get into the migration, pre-migration work, items to consider is also your licensing. Most often, customers have mixes of licensing, and we really encourage you to think about that ahead of time of how you're assigning the licenses to these users. We suggest strongly to do it before we do the migration on Exchange to Exchange. And the reason we say get that correct is some of these SKUs can actually give totally different experiences. So example, if you assign an E3 to somebody, and they're only supposed to be getting the light SKU and so supposed to have OA access. Day one, they could get onto Outlook and see their email, and then day two, you correct their SKU, and all of a sudden they're in OA. And they're like, well, what is that supposed to mean, right? So get your licensing, make sure you have a plan for how that is part of your scheduling, you have that aligned. And then the testing and throughput. I know this is something that, Sharon, you were kind of hitting on, how fast can you move? Exchange really offers a great option where, and I'll dive into in the next slide of how we're able to stage the data. But really what we do is we work through on how fast we can move this data by setting up the amount of looking at the concurrent connections and the impact on your environment. Because it's not just about how big the mailboxes are. We want to make sure that we don't impact your environment by moving data too fast. And making so we look at your concurrent connections on the threads. We'll start as low as 20. And we'd rather ramp up through the pilot phases to higher concurrent connections, increase the amount that we can move, rather than hitting you strong in the beginning and have an outage. And then we're having another discussion before we can even get migrations going again. So with that said, that's kind of that thing we look at is, how do we, using the throughput, there's many factors we want to think and how it impacts the business.
That's right. So throughput is more than just the number of mailboxes that you migrate. It's also based on network and source server performance. Right. So let's stay on the topic of timing as well as keeping Contoso in mind. Mm-hmm. Can you show us a typical migration timeline, please?
Absolutely. So a typical timeline to get to velocity is about 3 to 4 weeks. And this is if you are doing these steps along the way in the right timeline. And where we're going from that, and again, this can completely depend on the remediation that does happen. I'm talking about kind of a good scenario here. Steps 1 and 2, what we have here is, we work with you to get the firewall parts set up, make sure that, the hybrid configuration is done. And those phases are actually things you can work on in the assess, coming out of assess in the remediate phase before you really even get into migrations. Have those done. Because that means when we get to the next phases, and I want to highlight in this, we go into this part where we do the cross-certification with you, and then we start kicking off the test migrations. This is where MRS works. And I'm sure any Exchange person, even on 2010, really knows how Exchange works and the MRS. I still think it's one of the coolest migration methodologies because it's so low impacting. We're replicating the data into hidden mailboxes. You don't see them. The end user doesn't even know what's happening. we're staging that data and making sure that making sure all of our applications happens correctly. And so at the time of the migration, we're just doing a delta stick and kicking it over. Your end users really don't see an impact. I was on stage at Nestle. We did a great migration with them, 300,000 users. Wasn't necessarily the message I wanted, but they said they really didn't have to do much adoption because the users just changed over to Office 365, but it spurred on the rest of their business and really getting adoption going on in other parts of Microsoft 365. The point I'm trying to make here is if we set it up correctly, they went through the diligence of testing, the configuration, making sure that they had good test pilot users from around the world. They were globally located, so if you have 2 or 3 locations or 7, or they had 300, we did test mailboxes from all those locations to really make sure we were all set up correctly. So we went to Velocity. We never ended up in a pause moment with any of the divisions because something happened or something unexpected. We were trying to reduce the potential for incidences or, oh yeah, we should have thought of that. Because that's always, I know when, as an IT staff person, I was external my years before Microsoft as a consultant, you never want to have that moment of, oh, we should have thought of that, or somebody to think, why didn't they think of that? So really in this pilot phase, we really work through those things, and then we continually, once we get to Velocity, we don't just turn off the lesson and learn. We want to continually work with you all as you're moving and figuring out how can we make this yet better? How can we make this yet faster for the data groups? And so it's usually around 3 to 4 weeks how we get there.
All right. So Exchange migration, as Thomas noted, is pretty straightforward and it makes sense. But what does this look like for someone with Notes and perhaps someone that has both Exchange and Notes?
Yeah, Sharon, that's a great question. And we do run into scenarios like that. And the initial thing is, can we do both at the same time? That's what people really want to do. There's enough complexities going on, especially when you start talking about Lotus Notes, that we really don't encourage or even go the direction of doing parallel migrations from Lotus Notes or Exchange or Gmail and Exchange. We really try to keep those in sequential order. It keeps the focus on the project at hand. I'm not saying it's not technically feasible, but we really want the focus on getting these individual sets of mail migrations done. But Lotus Notes is more complex. And we do have a project scope of how we look at our migrations from Lotus Notes. And in that, we understand that typically Lotus Notes, as I said, I can't believe it's still around, but that's something that's sometimes customers have had that for 20 to 30 years. There's typically a lot of data. There's impact on the environments when we start doing these moves. And so we encourage customers, our scope is actually set to 90 days of historical email and calendar, and full contacts. Now that's what we say on the service description, because we're trying to want you to really have a focus on what's going on. We absolutely understand in some cases, and this is where sometimes Lotus Notes customers are having to deal with this, because this is why they still are on Lotus Notes, is there's a lot of legal stuff going on with their documents. And so our emails. And so we understand that, and that's something that you can work with your FastTrack team to get an exception on how many days back we migrate. But really we want to make sure we're moving only what you really need in the cloud, not just a storage unit. Office 365 shouldn't be seen as a storage unit. We have other services that's part of Microsoft 365 you can use as a storage unit. So think about that from that scope. Also on a configuration side, we need you to look at also making sure your domain is ready to go for this migration. FastTrack doesn't actually do the NAB to Active Directory remediation. We have a list of great partners that do that work to help you get ready for that transition. But so you need to make sure you're getting through those phases. Again, now, signing a license is a little bit different than Lotus Notes. We'll actually, based on the tool sets we give you and the scripts, we'll need to know the licenses, and because we'll actually assign them to the users, not manually, but based on the list that you give us, the user plus their license, and it will automatically apply that license to that user. Because we need the mailbox live and going to be able to put the data in at the time of the migration. And then also the staging sequence is a little bit different. We actually took a step when we looked at how do we help customers move to Office 365. We thought it was a very odd story and now install a bunch of hardware on premise so we can move you to the cloud. That's kind of the opposite of what we're trying to promote. Like cloud is supposed to be less footprint. Now install a bunch of servers. So we use Azure. We cover those costs. We set up a subscription individually for you as the customer. And we set up our tool sets in Azure. There's a little bit of work we have to do on the Lotus Notes side so that the replication will work. And then we replicate that data to the cloud, and then we push that data then into your mailbox from Azure. So there's a 2-hop part. So we have to think about that staging sequence of how we stage the data. And then we also have to think about the throughput. With 2 hops, you have to take that into consideration. And often we see with the Lotus Notes environments is there is more options for some hardware issues, older pieces of hardware out there. We're hitting tagging the networks a little bit more to replicate the data. Again, we'll work through that through the test and pilot phases to make sure we're not going to tip over the environment. So just kind of a consideration there.
Now, what about the timeline for nodes? Is it similar to Exchange migration? And while you're at it, can you please address access and infrastructure issues?
Yeah, absolutely. So the timeline is kind of a similar approach that we take for this, but there are some things we do take in consideration that are a little bit more work, as I was saying, the complexity. Unfortunately, unlike Exchange, we're not able to use an RBAC role to restrict our access. So we fully understand that we're asking, we do need a Notes admin account to be able to move your data. And that's not necessarily, I know it's not a lighthearted ask. Some people kind of feel like when we ask them for, they're like, hey, that's kind of a big access point like that you're asking for here. So fully understand that. But what we've also done is when we work with you and your team is to really focus on what we need access to only, and tackling the hardware that we're using with the endpoints, using VPN to try to secure, tackling the endpoints. So we're only able to look at your side. The exposure from your side is strictly to the Azure tenant where we're going to be moving your data. But we go through that all in the assessment and the remediation. We give you that information for you able to set that up correctly. And so then we get into, I'm going to highlight here a little bit kind of how we do this with Azure. It's basically a big farm. Some people call it, some people use terms of like military terms of how it's set up, but pretty much we have these different, we have an MSO rep server, replication server that's actually pulling the data from your Notes environment into Azure and replicating the data. And we usually do that. We want to keep it about 21 days in advance of when you want to migrate. And that's where we found the sweet spot of making sure we get everything so that at the time of the migration, we're actually putting the complete mailbox in there for the end user. And when we're doing that, once we have the replication, we then push that data out to what we call our kits and workstations. And we ramp up and scale down based on the volumes that you're pushing through to us. We find that sweet spot to have enough kits and workstations. And those kits or workstations are actually opening up Outlook, and we're actually taking the converted mailbox, pushing that data into the Outlook profile, and then that's actually being pushed then up to the Exchange server. So that's how we do that. And then, the setup of that was something that we work together on. We continually iterate on it. And then this is when we get into that pilot phase that we really start seeing, hey, is there any nuances that we have found here? This is where we do find maybe an older Notes version on one server out there somewhere, and we need to figure out how we're going to address that. But as we go through, and so it's just this constant iteration sharing of how we pull that through. And so it ends up being about 5 to 6 weeks, depending on how things are lined up. And I'm always put attenuation on this because there are things that will come up if remediation takes a while, or we find something when you're trying to do your AD remediation. There are things that do come up. It's kind of a general target. If you come into that stage 3 with those parts set up and that ready to go, we can usually get you going in 5 to 6 weeks.
All right, so we've talked about Exchange on-prem and Lotus Notes migrating to Exchange Online. Let's play with another scenario. We have a customer called Blue Yonder Airlines that is on Google, and they want to be able to have a parallel migration. What are their options here?
Yeah, Sharon, that's a great question. And Google customers often come to us with extremely tight timelines. They want to get off because, and I understand, you don't want to pay licenses in 2 services, right? Unlike the Exchange and Domino world, it's something that's on premise. You've got a service that you're paying for, and you want to get off that quickly. And so the focus is often of how fast can I move? And we totally understand that part. We will not guarantee timelines. We can't, just because of all the things that come up. We're not going to put you at risk by saying, yes, we could do this, because then you take a full dependency on that. And rather have you look at what are the risks you're willing to take on how we can get that done. And so one of the things is, even though for Notes migrations we do calendar and contacts and email fully, we ask you to look, is that really what you need if you're really trying to meet an aggressive timeline? One of the bigger customers we've moved off of Google was 75,000 seats. 40,000 of those, 65,000 of those, they actually did just contacts for those users, for majority of the users, because they really wanted to meet a tight timeline. And then their last 5,000 seats there, I think that's the math, maybe I got it wrong, maybe 10,000 seats, they did the full mailbox for those sets of people. And that was just a decision they made because they wanted to meet a timeline, understand the parameters. And part of that influence on that is you do have Google throttling what we do. They're a service. That's their prerogative to do so. And so we have to take that into consideration. We want you to take that into consideration how you're doing that setup. The configuration, again, is we set up with just a mail flow. So email flows between the two. There isn't coexistence between Google. We know some partners that have tried this. There's been challenges around that because Google changes their APIs on a consistent basis. They've proven to be very agile in a good, maybe not in a good way, depending on how you look at it. But we also have the signing of licenses. We need you to sign the licenses before we get into migrations. So we actually have the mailbox to actually put the data into. And then the copying structure and sequence, it's calendar, contacts, or contacts, calendar, and then mail in items that we move first, and then the rest of the data. And that's based on the feedback from our customers of what are the most critical things that get moved over, because potentially a migration could drag into the next day. The user would be active in their Office 365 mailbox, and the email would be then filling in behind. But the throughput, I want to really bring this up again. Something we have to remember is that Google is a service, and you're moving off of them. This is not their priority. So they do kind of, they have a right to throttle and make sure that the migrations don't hurt their other customers. So typically we see around 10 gigabytes per day of movement on throughput on the mail side. But you did ask about parallel migration share, and I think Tom can cover that.
Yeah, absolutely. So with a Google environment, it's almost guaranteed that you're using Gmail and G Drive in some form. And so the common question we get is, okay, well, if I have a user and they're in their Gmail inbox, how could I actually migrate their G Drive at the same time? And from a scheduling standpoint, we certainly can do that. We can absolutely bash our users and schedule both their Gmail mailbox with their G Drive. However, what we can't guarantee is that the completion of those two objects happens at the same time. More often than not, typically their Gmail will finish first, and depending on the size of their G Drive and what's in it, it could be many days later before their G Drive completes. So take that into consideration. So you can at least start the process, you can get them into Exchange Online as soon as possible, and then they'll see in their OneDrive, their files slowly populating over time, just depending on the type of content they have. So with G Drive, there is a few things to consider. So first, when you're working with FastTrack, the first thing to remember is our scope and really the information architecture of environment. What we found is that almost all organizations, they use Google Drive sort of as a personal file share, enterprise file share and sync, and that maps very well to the OneDrive. And so that's what we'll migrate your Google users over to. So it's a very simple process. You tell us, here's my source Google user. You give us the target user you have in Office 365 in a mapping file, and then we just pick up all the files and all the content that we can, move it over into their new OneDrive for Business. The next thing to think about is also our migration scope. So again, going back to TechNet, you'll definitely want to go back and take a look at what we consider to be in scope for migration and out of scope. Now, we typically migrate most stuff that you would expect, right? We're going to migrate your files and your permissions, and it will even actually migrate some of those native file formats of Google, right? So your Google Sheets, for instance. However, there are things that we don't migrate. So for instance, Google Forms. So if you're a heavy user of Forms, you'll probably want to consider how you're going to actually recreate that in SharePoint or come up with a different solution for your users. So understanding that going in is definitely key. Rationalizing your content is really about looking at the Google Drives I have and determining if I need to migrate all that content. So again, going back to that throughput comment that Thomas really landed on, we've noticed that very large Google Drives take a long amount of time, right? We've actually seen some users take days to weeks to complete a migration if they have a lot of content, terabytes of content. So you really want to look at, do I really need to move all that, right? Is it really required? Can I clean up some of that content, just move maybe the last 30 days worth of information? Can that meet my organization's needs? Sometimes you might even have legacy Google Drives that are owned by some service account that you don't even need the files anymore, right? So don't schedule that. So think about how you can rationalize your content, and that could speed up your migration. Now, with permissions and sharing, right? So cloud environment, it's very easy in Google, easier in OneDrive, to share content out with the rest of the organization, and we are going to honor those permissions and sharing. So if you shared content within your organization, we're going to move that over in the migration, and it'll be reshared out as we move over. Now, something to consider, though, is, well, there's two things. One is external users. So if you've shared content outside of your organization, we're not going to re-invite those external users back in automatically and reshare it. So typically what we recommend is this is a good opportunity for you to rationalize what's actually been shared out. Take the opportunity to clean that up, right? Do I really need to share all this content out with all these different organizations? Maybe it's not required anymore. And then where it is, educate your users on how they're going to go ahead and invite those external users back in. Very simple flow with OneDrive for Business and SharePoint. Also with sharing, so this is an interesting, I would say, sort of like a side effect, user experience-wise, with the migration. So if you're familiar with Google Drive, you look at your Google Drive, you'll see a bunch of files that you own and also files that have been shared with you. Right? And to the end user, I just see this nice big long list, and I consider that to be my content. Now, when we migrate a user, what we're actually migrating is the content that they own. So you can imagine a scenario where, let's say I'm coming from Google Drive, and maybe I see 20 items in my drive, 10 of which that I own, 10 of which that have been shared with me. When I get to OneDrive, if I haven't scheduled that user that was sharing with me, what I will initially see is just the 10 files that I own. Now, there could be a little bit of confusion there, right? So an end user, they may go, wow, I had 20 files, now I have 10, where'd they go? That's just simply explaining, yes, those files were actually shared with you, and then when we complete the migration, those files will naturally appear as files shared with you in OneDrive. So keep that in mind, and that actually ties nicely to the change management and communication portion of the project, making sure users understand what to expect, and more importantly, helping your help desk explain it to your end users so that they're not alarmed when that occurs. And that ties again also to scheduling. So this is where we provide some guidance on how should you be batching your users so that you have the best collaborative experience as you move over into SharePoint and OneDrive. Thinking again about how content is shared within your organization, trying to batch those users potentially by team structures or by organizational structure or other means of looking at how certain groups of people are tightly collaborating and trying to group those together so that they get the most optimal experience as they move through. And then finally, throughput, just like on the Gmail side, G Drive, we have equal throttling, and so we have seen that sometimes be an issue. So again, it's really important if you're thinking about moving off of Google Drive, do that sooner than later, right? Contact and work with FastTrack as soon as possible so we can get that data flowing. So now, let's actually take a look at the flow in a little bit more detail. So with either project, Gmail or G Drive, same basic starting point. We're going to set up your migration environment. So Thomas talked about us spinning up an Azure environment to conduct the migration. We'll do that for both your Gmail and G Drive. You're going to give us some basic information, the accounts we need to access the source and move files into the target, and then we'll get that all set up and tested. When that's ready to go, you're going to give us a migration schedule. So again, thinking about how you're going to batch those users, migrating both their Gmail and their G Drive, trying to group users by some sort of collaborative boundaries that make sense for your org. Then things get a little different depending on the type of migration you're doing. So with Google Gmail, we have two different flavors of how we'll do the mail migration. So one is a simple cutover, and one is more of a two-step process. So in the simple cutover, we're actually just migrating all of your emails, your contacts, your calendar all at once. You switch over your MX record, and you're done. For a larger migration, what's actually going to happen is we're going to stage all of your mail. We're going to move that first. We're then going to set up mail forwarding in Google to forward to your new Exchange Online mailbox. Then we're going to come back and do a Delta sync. We're going to grab the rest of the mail that we've missed in the process and also then migrate over all of your calendar and contacts, then switch over your MX record so that your mail goes naturally to Office 365. Now, on the G Drive side, things are a little bit simpler. It's a one-pass process. So we're going to go ahead and for that batch of users, schedule them up in your migration environment. That's going to run for as long as it takes to move the files. When that's complete, if you haven't already done so, we're going to help you set up your sync client, right? So we really want to provide that great experience to your end users. You can do it beforehand. We help you do it afterwards. Pros and cons to both approaches that we can talk through. And then finally, when you're done, and typically when you're done with the entire environment, you want to think about deprovisioning your Google Drives.
All right, Tom and Thomas, thanks for covering Google scenario as well as the parallel migration. Now let's go ahead and go into file shares migration.
Sure, absolutely, yeah. So, I mean, how many people here have file shares? I mean, pretty much everybody, right? Absolutely, yeah. It's one of the oldest technologies we have, and everybody within most organizations has one or more flavors of file share in their org. So there's a couple things to consider. So when you're thinking about moving your content to the cloud, And even if you're doing it with FastTrack or without FastTrack, the infrastructure is going to be an interesting requirement. So with file share migrations, using various different tools, we've found that you get better throughput by scaling horizontally within your organization, adding more servers that can pull more content faster, package it, and get it to Office 365. So you'll definitely have infrastructure on-prem. Now, hopefully you have private cloud and you have the ability to spin up some virtual machines to do this. But the more infrastructure you can provide, the faster your data is going to flow. Also consider things like your network, right? So you have to consider, how much data you're pushing out and what type of pressure it's going to put on your network links. Also think about your topology, your geography of the data centers you work out of. So typically, large organizations, many data centers, you usually want to have your migration infrastructure closest to your source files. That means you'll probably have one or more migration machines spread across the world. So it's just things to take into consideration. And of course, if you're working with FastTrack, because we are a remotely provided benefit, you will be spinning up a VPN connection for us. And so sometimes that can take time. So work and ask for those requirements up front right away so that we can work through the details, make sure that we can connect and perform your migration. Second, you want to think about the file share scenarios. So a common scenario is your personal file share, right? Your home drive, your P drive, whatever you call it in your organization. We all got them. That's a great scenario. Move it over to OneDrive. Users are going to get a wonderful new experience. They're going to have sync across devices, mobile access, sharing. It goes on and on and on, right? It's a great thing. But there are going to be some scenarios that are you're probably using file shares for that maybe aren't a good fit for SharePoint, right? So maybe you have some line of business systems that are dumping data into your file shares. Maybe you have like extremely large files, like these huge CAD files or video or other things. You're going to want to identify that up front, and you're going to want to consider that in your plan. So it's not always possible to completely deprecate your file share infrastructure as part of your project. So when you're thinking about that from a business case standpoint, you're definitely going to be moving most of your content out, but there's probably going to be some areas where you're still going to have file shares on-prem, so consider that in your planning. Rationalizing what you move. So very, very common, right? We're seeing tens of terabytes, hundreds of terabytes, and we even have customers that are in the petabyte scale asking us, well, how do we move a couple petabytes of data into your cloud? So the more you can rationalize and try to reduce that footprint, the better. Again, looking at strategies like, when was the last time users have actually changed these files? When is the last time it's actually been accessed, if you have that auditing turned on? These are things that can give you indicators of how you can potentially trim off some of your old content and focus on what's really important, which is what we consider to be that live collaborative content the users really want in their SharePoint and OneDrive experience. And then finally, think about governance and security up front. So the beauty of the cloud is you actually get a ton of great security and compliance features that you probably don't even have on premises. But it's really important to meet with your security and compliance people right within the org to make sure they understand what those capabilities are and how they may map to existing processes and get them comfortable with moving to the cloud. What you don't want to do is surprise them last minute and be like, hey, guess what? We're getting ready to move our file shares. And then someone goes, wait, time out. We have DLP. We have all these different auditing tools. How does this all work? Think about that up front. There's definitely great capability that we provide out of box with Azure and Office 365. And so almost always there's going to be a mapping of something you've done on premises. Now it works even better in the cloud. So work through those details really before and during while you're planning your migration.
All right, so we know a little bit about how to prepare for file share migration. Now, can you walk us through the actual process of migration itself?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So first, I want to show you something really cool. So how many people were in Jeff Teeper's general session Tuesday?
Couple.
A couple. All right.
But did you hear what was announced?
Yes. So, among all the wonderful features that we're adding to the service, one of the cool things we just announced is we now have a free migration tool for SharePoint and OneDrive. So if you're looking to migrate content, your file share content, and even some of your content from SharePoint sites, your documents out of document libraries, you can now do that self-service. So this is actually one of the options that we encourage you to look at because maybe your migration is so simple you want to try to do it yourself, right? It actually might take more time to set up the VPN and work with us to get it all done. So let me show you how this works. It's actually really, really simple. So I'm actually going to do this via video because we're not going to put you through the torture of trying to use conference Wi-Fi and migrate some files. But what we have here is a typical OneDrive, right? So I spun up a brand new environment for this. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to use the new SharePoint migration tool to move some files into the environment. So you see here I've got basically an empty document library, so nothing within it. Now I'm going to spin up the new SharePoint migration tool. So you can see here, I mean, it is literally as simple as select your source, go ahead and choose where you're migrating to. Well, that site collection, that's the target, and then click go. I mean, does it get more simple than that? So moving forward, click next. Now here, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to enter in an account for the site collection administrator that I'm targeting. I'm going to go ahead and provide the password. Okay, we do that. We're going to go ahead and sign in. And through the magic of movie science, it's going to magically work.
The suspense.
I know. Come on, sign in. You can sign in. Okay, so here you can see a couple things. So notice we now support SharePoint on premises, file shares, and then also there's a third option here. If you actually want to do a bulk migration, you want to schedule many different file shares at once. You can even intermatch some source SharePoint sites. You can do all that in one operation. Today, we're just going to focus on just the file share portion. So you click on file share. Click the share that you want to migrate. Very, very simple. So here I'm just going to go ahead and pick a local folder. This can be coming from one of your file shares. Okay, you enter in the destination URL. Once you do that, you can go ahead, it'll auto-discover the document libraries that we can target. You pick where you want to go, and literally you add it as a migration job. And once you've done that, you're going to go ahead and click Migrate, or you can also save all of this to CSV so you can actually see how you schedule it in bulk. But you click Migrate, very simple user experience. It's going to go ahead and validate the target environment. It's going to validate the files before we move it in, and then it's going to actually perform the migration. One of the interesting things is the output of the tool, so you can get statistics and success reports that are actually in CSV format. So if you think about more complex operations where maybe you want to ingest that and build like a reporting solution across your organization, you could do that. So you can see here, I've gone ahead and migrated those files, and we click refresh inside of my OneDrive, and magically there they are. So you can see that migration can be easy when you're using the SPMT tool. So
I saw him build this last night, so it really did happen. This is not all just animation.
Yeah, exactly. So, and if you don't believe me, try it yourself. So to do that, you're going to go over to AKMS SPMT, the SharePoint migration tool. And more importantly, I'm sure you probably have a lot of questions where you go, hey, what type of authentication does it support? Can I migrate certain stuff out of my SharePoint site? The next session, right after ours, is actually migration to SharePoint with OneDrive and Office 365 process and options with the team that built this tool. Right? So go next door, literally across the hall to F2, and you can get all the detailed information about SPMT. So I encourage you to do that. So now, if you don't want to do it yourself, let's look at what this looks like when you do it with FastTrack. So there it is, and we're done. No, just kidding. So let's break this down to make this a little bit more simple. So first, we're going to start off with your on-premises environment, right? Pretty straightforward. You're going to have file shares. You're going to have things that are Windows Server, and obviously you're going to have file shares that are not, right? So we support SMB Protocol 2.0 and above, right? So any device that's on your network will migrate as long as it's 2.0 and up. And then you're going to have typically your Active Directory on-prem. Now the first thing you're going to want to do is, well, you obviously will have your purchased Office 365 environment. The first thing we're going to walk you through is setting up synchronization between your on-premises AD and Azure Active Directory. Now, this is important in a file share migration because we want to migrate those permissions. And to do that, we have to make sure the users are migrated up, the groups that you maybe have used on-premises exist, so that we can go ahead and do that migration. Next, you're going to provide that infrastructure. So again, we do require virtual machines on-premises, and so we'll provide the specifications and some recommendations on the number of machines. Also remember that for every migration that we do, we learn about the velocity that we can get out of your environment, because it's dependent on many things. It's dependent on your source systems, your network, the destination that you're going to. So we do a pilot and we do multiple runs, and then as we learn, we'll make recommendations for change. We might say, hey, you can get better throughput if you give us more infrastructure. So that may change over time. All right, so next, we establish VPN connectivity to that infrastructure from a dedicated Azure subscription. So as Thomas mentioned, when you engage with FastTrack, you're going to get an Azure subscription free of charge that we use that's dedicated to your company and your project alone. So we never share infrastructure environments across projects, so you can be assured that your data is safe. So we're going to go ahead and connect to your infrastructure over VPN. Now we're going to do that actually from a secure environment that we set up within Azure that enforces that our migration personnel are using two-factor authentication, that we're using conditional access, and other policies to ensure the safety of your environment. So we go ahead, go through that to get to the Azure subscription we provide free of charge, and then we remote into your environment and actually conduct the migration. And in this case, we literally run the tool that I just showed you. So there's no magic under the covers. It's literally we run SPMT at scale. We just do it so in a way that you don't have to worry about it. All right. So we're going to go ahead and remote in. We conduct the migration. The migration itself, what's happening is it's packaging up your files. What we use is called the migration API to get content into SharePoint and OneDrive. One of the key security features is that package that we upload is encrypted, right? So we generate keys on premises dynamically, and that's what's used to encrypt your content before we send it up to the cloud. That actually goes up into Azure. Now this is Azure storage that's part of SharePoint, right? So this is not something that you need to provide or worry about, technically provided by the migration API. And then once there, our migration infrastructure in SharePoint is going to go ahead and pick up those packages, it decrypts them, and then moves the content into your tenant. So pretty straightforward. So now, let's take a look at how it works cloud to cloud. So cloud to cloud, very similar, so only a few key differences. So first, starting off with your cloud environments, Box and Google Drive. You have your subscription, you have Azure Active Directory. However, you don't necessarily have to set up synchronization, right? Because we totally expect that the users you have within your Box environment or Google Drive probably don't match the users that you're going to have up in Office 365. So what you will provide is a mapping. Right, you're going to let us know this user in Box is now this user in Office. From there, we stand up the exact same infrastructure, so you're going to get a FastTrack provided subscription. Now the difference here is in this subscription, you'll actually get migration infrastructure, so there's really no need for anything on premises. Right? We'll stand up tens and for really large environments, hundreds of machines, again, free of charge. We stand it up, we manage it to conduct your migration. We'll remote into that infrastructure exact same way through the exact same secure protocols that we have in place, we talked about for file share. And then we're going to use the APIs for those cloud sources to pull the content out. When the content gets pushed up, it's using the migration API, same thing, it's encrypted. When it hits Azure, it's then decrypted by SharePoint, picked up and moved into the service.
All right, that's great stuff. Thanks for walking us through that. Now, we're coming close to the end of the session, and I want to make sure there's plenty of time to ask questions. But before we get there, let's ask Thomas to address how FastTrack takes care of security.
Yeah, I mean, we've kind of mentioned security throughout this whole session, and really we fully embrace what we're asking you to work with us with. We're moving your data. That is your stuff. And so security is something that we constantly are looking at. We showed you these models, how we do these things. Hey, we do ACLing here. But we're constantly looking how we evolve this further and further and further. Because really, I don't want my team members to actually see your data, or even have the possibility to see your data. Don't worry, we're busy enough, we don't take the time to do it, even if we have, according to the technical write-up of that permission that we could. We have plenty of work to do. So we're constantly looking how do we do further RBAC roles. We are looking even if Lotus Notes doesn't require us, we can't get RBAC roles at the Lotus Notes environment, how do we reduce in our side what we can see? How can we time out people, lockbox people out of the migration so when a migrator's done, they're out. There's no reoccurring. Always working on how better our policies on how we retain data. We do have policy for how we remove the data once we're done with migration. Those Azure subscriptions that we set up, those are not reused subscriptions. We dump those. Those are gone. There was actually a question that came up last year about that, and it was a fair question, but we set up a fresh subscription every time for each customer, and that's your unique subscription in our Azure infrastructure. And we're also looking at our physical, always looking at how we better the physical presence of our team and how we're working. We use offshore data centers that are key carded, everything like that. So there's protection that's happening when our team is executing that work. And of course, we're always trying to extend the encryption level of when we're transporting this data. My personal opinion and the way I look to my team and push on my team is, every Hollywood movie, where's the heist happen? It's when the data's in transport, the truck's in transport, the car is being transported on a truck. It never happens when it's sitting at rest in the secure environment. That's not when the heist happens. And so I'm not trying to scare people. I'm just sharing you that we do take this very, very seriously in how we work. But it's also why we also talk to you about, in a lot of this work, Tom was talking about in the file share migrations, what do you need to move? Is it the right thing to move that data into that scenario? Or is that data, should that be resting in a different location? Microsoft is constantly coming out with Teams, with Microsoft 365 in general, just stuff with Azure, where there might be a better location for where stuff in file, especially the file share world, it's been resting there because it was a good repository for people just to put their stuff. Is it now actually better in a different location? So we're constantly looking how we evolve our business. We're always welcome for feedback from you as the customers, and share your concerns with us. If you don't share your concerns with us, we don't know what you're worrying about. And so we always encourage people to provide that feedback to us on a constant basis. So with that, I would like to open it up to questions and answers. Please come up to the mic so everybody can hear, and that's how you get a pie, by coming to the mic. And now
Free pie.
It's not an edible pie. I hope we know that. Somebody asked me that one time. So yes, let's start over here.
Yeah, I have a question for you. So the FastTrack is to move all of your data into a tenant.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so suppose that the time comes where you no longer need that tenant,
Mm-hmm.
and it could be for any reason, not,
Right.
Whatever. Are there any tools or programs or any assistance available to kind of retrograde all of that data and stuff, or is it up to the customer to kind of collect all of that?
Right. So FastTrack
Before it
doesn't.
gets delivered.
Yeah. So FastTrack doesn't provide get you out of the service program. There are tools on the mail side to move the data out. You can use MRS if you're going to move to Exchange on-prem to move that data out.
And there's plenty of third parties on the SharePoint OneDrive side. In fact, I encourage you to go down to the expo. Many of them are there, and they can talk you through how they do migration. Most of the migration partners that we have the ability to move data in and also can move it out.
And I'm going to hit one that usually comes up with this, and so I'm sorry if I'm taking somebody's pie, but the tenant-to-tenant migration, that's also one that comes up where they say, hey, I had 2 tenants, I moved some data here, moved it there, how can you guys help me collapse your tenant-to-tenant? We don't have an answer for that right now. It's part of the architecture design of Office 365. We don't allow 2 domains to have the same 2 tenants to have the same domain names. That's totally a logical, secure thing. Otherwise, so I could be set up a tenant and say, hey, I'm Disney.com, right? I don't think Disney would be very happy with me if I did that. So that's part of the architecture. But what that also means is that all your data is attached to that domain. So we simply can't just shove the domains together when you're trying to merge those domains. So it is something that Microsoft is very, very much looking at. How do we address? Our focus was first how do we get customers to Office 365, but now we're having a lot of customers on 365. Thank you. We're really enjoying that. But now we need to look how we address the tenant-to-tenant. And your question about moving off also can also mean how do I move tenant-to-tenant? So that's why I wanted to share that.
For like mergers and
Yep, mergers and acquisitions, absolutely. And there's also scenarios in this too, is often mergers will happen in a point of maybe this is not a full merger. Maybe it's just a project merger. 2 companies we're going to work together. I only want to share some of my stuff or create a kind of group that's going to work together on this project. When it's done, copies of data go both to those companies, and that project's over. There's like we're creating an alliance type thing. And so we're really trying to look at how we address those. No timelines on that, but totally understand the ask and the message. And we do need to look at how we address that.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
Great question.
The Azure Active Directory licensing, does it work with the free licensing, or do you have to have the basic, premium?
So it comes with the basic licensing, and then you can always upgrade it. Right? So if you're looking for the premium features, that can be added.
And I would assume that during the migration of file share to OneDrive, you're going to want to have that totally unshared so that users aren't messing with it at the time. So
Yeah, so what we typically recommend is that you put your source file shares in read-only, right? So you can, there's multiple different methods you can do that with, and then as long as we can read the files, we can still package them and then move them up.
okay, good, thank you.
Let's go over here. We'll just alternate sides. Oh,
Oh, you're next.
In the self-migration scenario from a file share
Yeah.
to SharePoint Online, are the permissions taken care of in the self-migration tool?
Yes, yep. So it actually, and in fact, I really encourage you to check the session across
Yeah.
the way because they're going to go into detail. But in short, what it'll do is if you've already set up synchronization, it's going to use Active Directory and locate those users and change the ACLs over. If it can't do that or you turn off that option, there's also a mapping feature within the tool, so you can upload like a CSV and then it'll discover your source and target users that way and then move the permissions. So
Okay,
yes.
from the source to the target being the SharePoint Online
That's right.
site?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, there are some differences between the permission model of NTFS and SharePoint and OneDrive, like some things that the service doesn't do, like deny ACLs. So there are certain things that won't migrate, but definitely your standard sharing permissions, those will definitely move.
Great, thanks.
well, we still have 11 minutes in the session. Let's keep taking questions, but I know some people, because the wonderful closeness of all these sessions to each other, will want to leave a little early to get to the next one. I just want to remind everybody, please fail your evals. Microsoft Ignite will donate $5 to Red Cross in relief for all the stuff that's been going on around here. Just
Huge
want to reiterate
impact.
that. Huge impact. So I think you were the next.
Hey, we're going to be, my company's going to be switching over next year. We've got a on-premises, much less common mail server. I was talking with some of the guys down at the expo, some of the third party, and they were saying, oh, as long as you can get the mailbox into a PST, we can upload it. Is that something I can do through FastTrack, or do I have to go through a third party?
So there's a couple ways you can look at that. No, FastTrack doesn't do a PST migration service per se. There is a PST import service that Microsoft offers. It's a pay. There's a cost for it, but depending on what you're trying to do. In those scenarios, this is where we actually meet with a lot with our partners and our partner community to talk about, hey, these are the scenarios we need to go tackle because it is unique what you're trying to do. So yes, we could do the IMAP migration probably, which wouldn't be what you want because you want more than just if it's IMAP enabled, your platform. That's just mail that we'll be pulling across on there. But happy to talk with you afterwards. And we'll also, Tom and I will be down the booths. There's a big FastTrack booth in the middle. There's a lot of areas of it. Look around the center of the FastTrack booth. That's usually where I get stuck. And we have little rooms to meet with customers directly so we can have a side conversation and not be talking out in the open about your scenarios. So thank you.
Great, thanks.
Yes.
Bandwidth.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a tool to calculate how much bandwidth, after we move our data up there, that we have to have, like for an internet circuit, depending on the number of users and amount of data?
There's a network analyzer tool out there. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, and there's some additional guidance, absolutely.
Yeah, it is available. I don't say there's any fine trick like Pony, like, hey, that's gonna make it work perfectly. But there's guidance that we give, and there's that network analyzer that helps you rationalize that piece.
Where can we find that tool?
I think it's on is it on the Office 365?
Yeah, I believe it's actually just on Microsoft.com downloads.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes.
All right. We just completed our migration of all of our mailboxes over the summertime. So now we've gotten everyone actually kind of on board. I work for a school district, and over the first couple weeks here, we've gotten them on board with using it more. And now they want to expand into OneDrive.
Perfect.
We have a lot of file shares for different purposes, like you mentioned. Now, I was down at the booth the other day discussing a couple of the scenarios. I think I was at the OneDrive booth, and then they directed me to Teams. Is there specific scenarios that you recommend that they should go to Teams versus, just staying on OneDrive?
Yeah, that's the information architecture question, and so, I guess the real answer is it depends, right? Which doesn't answer the question.
Because the ones that people
but
directed
I
me
would,
there.
I would say that normally, so first, the most common scenario we see in the file shares is the personal file share, right? So your home drive. That 99.99% of the time maps perfectly to OneDrive, right? So you're going to want to move those files into that person's documents library in their OneDrive. From there, some of your departmental shares and team shares, It really depends on what type of experience you're trying to provide to those groups post-migration, right? So if you're trying to wrap sort of like the Teams view where you have conversations and some of the Teams capabilities, that makes sense versus maybe a SharePoint site. But if you're looking to have maybe some advanced workflows and a site hierarchy with different permissions because of the org structure you want to remodel, then maybe it makes more sense to go to Teams. And honestly, it does kind of require taking a look at it case-by-case basis and saying, what is this departmental share really used for? And then map it to the appropriate destination and then use the right tools to move.
Find us in the booth, in the
Yeah.
FastTrack booth, and we can take some time and talk with you. And it's really interesting because we used to have this in the mail world. People use shared folders where they just keep dumping, like, oh, we're doing projects. We set one up per project, a shared folder, mailbox, and then we all put the data and we pass emails back and forth and all that. I'm like, that's Teams. That is Teams. That is what it's meant for. You have a continuous conversation, everybody's chatting about it, and you put the files, attach it in the Teams. That's like, oh my gosh, that is what Teams is designed for. So just using that as a good kind of a way. So please definitely come down and find us. We can give you some of our thoughts. Again, every scenario is unique, and so you have to make those decisions of what you want to do with it.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
We have FastTrack for Azure in Azure government space, and if so, which services do you not have mapped for?
I don't know the exact answer to that, so here's the reason why. No. FastTrack, my team, we started with FastTrack with Office 365, and actually I love that you brought that segue. FastTrack is now expanded across CRM, Azure, and Windows. I'm not privy to, I'm not fully up, and that's my bad. I'm not fully up. But I do know that they have that. In the booth, there is an Azure part of the booth where we have EMS and Intune, and we also talk about some of the other segments there.
Okay.
Please come with your question there.
Awesome.
So,
Thank you.
yeah, sorry I couldn't answer it in detail. Yes.
Yes, I was wondering, we're using the migration tool on your 365 for the OneDrive.
Okay.
The migration tool. Is there a throttle on that data migration?
Tom,
Short
take
answer
that.
is yes. So there's two ways you basically get data into the service, and the first way and the recommended way is you use the migration API. It's been built and designed to get high throughput into the service and to avoid any type of throttling. So remember, when you're moving data in, the throttles there are really to protect your tenancy and all the other tenants that are in the environment, right? So you don't want anybody just overloading the cloud, right? We scale, but at some point things will start to slow down. So the preferred method is making sure you use migration API. Now most of your migration tools in the market will use it by default. Sometimes you have to enable it. They call it turbo mode, et cetera. So then there are scenarios, though, that you do have to use a secondary method, which we call the application APIs, or CSOM. Those are throttled. So there are some techniques that you can use to manage the throttling. Obviously, the recommended way would be to back off if you detect throttling, and most of the migration tools do that for you automatically. It will impact duration because they have to slow down the number of operations they're calling. But you want to make sure whenever you're in a migration that your tool is actually using the migration API. And actually dig into the details, because sometimes even though you turn it on, we've seen that there are some tools in market that will fall back to a CSOM mode, and you may not be aware of it. So you may think, why is this document library not moving so fast? It's actually because they, for whatever reason, reverted back, and so there could be some other configuration options that help you. So it's definitely something to keep a close eye on.
So if we utilize the FastTrack service, can that be adjusted?
Well, so if you use the FastTrack service, we will optimize the configuration of the tools that we choose for your project, but we cannot circumvent the throttling, right? So there's no magic backdoor for the FastTrack migration team. Again, those throttles are there to protect our tenants and the public service.
I would say what we also, though, is we have more
We have
knowledge
a lot
how
of
to
experience
recognize
on how to
and also make
exactly.
sure we don't hit that. Because a lot of these throttlings, and this is on the Exchange side, this is almost even our competitor tool sets. When you hit that throttle, they throttle you completely. Like everything comes to a screeching halt. So the goal is to just stay right underneath that throttle, so you don't top over that. And our partner tools out there too do that too. They should be looking at, and we also have conversations. We do have customers that don't use FastTrack. That's absolutely fine. It's not a requirement that you use FastTrack. It's available to you. Where they do run into some of these issues, and we find out, hey, you're using tool X or tool Y. We do engage with those partners and give them that kind of advice on, this is how you need to look at this. Because once you hit the throttle, they just go after you, and they have to do it because they don't know whether you're, if the reason they have those throttles is because something could also be something going, maybe something's gone bad in the environment, your source environment, that's now like trying to penetrate the Office 360 environment, so they just have to shut that down.
Well, I was using the Azure Explorer.
Okay.
And uploading
Yeah.
into the Azure space, and then
Okay.
moving into our mailboxes. But
Yeah. It'd be great to talk to you after about
Okay.
a little bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Two-part question. With the on-prem SharePoint to online SharePoint migration tool, does it actually map all the metadata and all the user associations and permissions?
Yeah, so great question. So the SharePoint migration tool that we just made available this week, so it is a beta. Its primary initial migration scope is document libraries. And so we're working on a roadmap and adding capabilities rapidly over time. That's a great topic for the session across the way. But it does move documents and document libraries and the basic metadata, so the permissions, et cetera. So yes, that's there.
So it won't do the whole site, but you can...
Doesn't
select
do the
all
whole
lists
site.
and
Yeah,
documents.
it's very much, in fact, we're advertising it right now as a document library migration tool, not a site migration tool.
Yeah, it does like lists and libraries. It's not like, it's not going to exclude anything out of that.
It does libraries today, so we're adding lists and then we're adding, yeah, so that's going to be coming rapidly, and that's going to be a great topic that they'll cover
So you
right
can
across the way.
also, I'm assuming that, you know, if you had like multiple sites you're trying to consolidate when you go online, you could basically point, you know, make the site and point to the one while you're migrating essentially too.
Well, yeah, so like the more advanced migration tools that are in market, so if you go down to the expo, talk to some of our partners, they have the ability of fine-grained information architecture remapping, and you can get as detailed as you want. You can combine document libraries and sites, and you know, it gets quite complicated, but it's a lot of upfront configuration and analysis.
It's just one of those things that the more free I can do, the faster I can do this
Yeah.
business.
There's part of this too is that, you know, there is, I totally get you on the free thing, is encourage you, is like even though some of our partners, there are scenarios where you need to do that fine tuning, fine mapping, but also really question yourself, does that really need to be moved that way there?
Yeah.
Right? Is
Yeah.
that architecture actually what I want to replicate in the cloud?
Yeah,
The
probably.
biggest thing, you know, I was talking in these sessions, is don't just lift and shift. Please don't just lift and shift, because you have had your problems on premise. We've all had IT problems on premise. I've built and rebuilt my Exchange servers, right? Not my personal ones, but that's what I used to do. And you know, you had to look at those and say, why are we doing that? So,
Yeah, plus
it-
new tools you guys have kind of drive different changes in how I want to
Yeah.
structure stuff anyway.
okay.
So, okay.
Thanks.
Yeah. Alright.
We are actually up on time.
Oh.
Happy to take these questions individually.
I have a quick question.
Okay.
I just got out of a
Thank you.
session on Exchange multi-geographic locations. for
Yeah,
Exchange
multi-geo.
Online.
Yeah, it's in
So
pilot.
Do you guys do that as well for Office
So-
365?
That is just now in, it's in a preview program, the multi-geo. When as that gets into market, we'll be able to then do those migrations that align with that for Exchange to Exchange.
Cool, thanks.
Yep. Thank you very much.